Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Lucy's Science Library. You've already read the title. You know we're going to be talking about a heavy hitter today with Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. This one's for you, Elijah. As always, stick around to the end for the cute bunny clip. You know it's what keeps you coming back to the channel. Come on now. Before we get too deep into the book review, though, I do have to mention that the Jurassic Park fan base is large and dedicated. There's going to be tons of great videos out there with tons of details about the book and the movie that I'm just not going to be able to cover as thoroughly in this video. So if you're interested in Jurassic Park or interested in reading the book, definitely check out some of these sites and sources afterwards, because there is a lot of stuff out there about them. And because of this, I'm going to talk about Jurassic Park in a bit more of a general sense than I do with most books. I'll break down the plot still and talk about the author, but we'll definitely be going over key points and focusing on my own personal opinions about why I like this book. And with that, on to the author, Michael Crichton. So who is Michael Crichton, you ask? Well, Michael Crichton is another author who follows the sci-fi tradition of being a super educated writer. Michael Crichton achieved an MD from Harvard Medical School, on top of writing books about computer programming and other topics. And his vast knowledge of different science fields really shows in his writing. He wrote over 26 novels before he unfortunately passed away, and these span across all genres, but definitely his greatest contributions have to be to the science fiction genre. He wrote such huge books as The Andromeda Strain, Timeline, Terminal Man, and of course the book we're talking about today, that he's probably most remembered for, Jurassic Park. Aside from being a graduate from a prestigious medical school and a writer, Michael Crichton had a ton of other accolades and different hobbies to his name. He developed games, he was a director for multiple films, just a wide-spanning career that covered many topics. He was truly an every kind of man. Now I bring this up because I think it really impacted his writing. You can tell that Michael Crichton's not only very good at researching the topics that he's interested in, but also just really good at presenting them. And Jurassic Park and a lot of his other books have really technical elements like that, presented into the books kind of like documentary style, and I think it's a real signature hallmark of his writing that does not get used or appreciated enough in modern sci-fi. But that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves and kind of going into the prose. Let's dial it back a little bit and talk about the plot. Jurassic Park follows a paleontologist named Alan Grant, as well as an assortment of other scientists and paleontologists, as they go to visit and verify the safety of an experimental, cutting-edge new park that deals with cloned dinosaurs brought back to the modern day. This entire park was funded by a John Hammond, a rich millionaire who was able to get fragments of dinosaur DNA and using supercomputers and fragments of other animals was able to recreate full strands of dinosaur DNA and clone them into modern, living, breathing animals again. Although Hammond designed his park with cutting-edge technology and fully automated security, there's been some safety breaches prior to the scientists visiting. So, to calm down his investors, he invites the scientists and Alan Grant to come verify that the park is safe for the public before its grand opening. Unfortunately for them, a series of system failures, lax security, and corporate espionage that's occurring from one of their own employees causes the park's many automated systems to completely fail, allowing the dinosaurs to come loose and wreak havoc during a tropical storm where it's difficult to stop them. From there, we follow the split up groups of scientists and John Hammond's own grandchildren as they try to survive the night as deadly dinosaurs hunt them down from all locations. Before we get into pros and cons, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. Or dinosaur in this case, I don't know. No, but we have to talk about the fact that Jurassic Park was turned into perhaps one of the most popular movies, and maybe one of the most influential ones of all time. So, that's definitely going to have an impact on how we talk about this book, and from time to time, I will be comparing it to the movie. However, the book did come first, and I'm going to be talking about the book's plot, not the movies. So if you hear casual mentions to it, I promise everybody I've read it, and they'll be brief if they're there. With that out of the way, let's talk about the many pros of this book, and why you should still read it, even if you have seen the movies. Pro number 1, the structure of this book is so cool. Pretty early on in the book, there's a mathematician who gets brought to the island named Ian Malcolm, famously played by Jeff Goldblum in the movie. Now, he's famous for his chaos theory, or his speculation that anything, any kind of organized system will eventually break down because the universe is too chaotic and math is too chaotic and we can't control everything. Now, because of this book is set up like it's an experiment or something going on in iterations. So instead of having just chapters or sections based on different parts, they have iterations. So each iteration gets crazier and crazier and crazier to kind of follow the chaos theory itself. I personally really like this structure, and it really added a lot to the tension. Whenever you would get to the page that said third iteration, fourth iteration, it added something because you knew, something bigger's coming, something wilder's happening, and the system's breaking down only more and more. And it's this chaos and these system breakdowns that lead us to pro number 2 of why I like this book so much. And that's the realism factor. Jurassic Park is super realistic to what would happen if the scenario actually played out in our world. There's a lot of dark aspects of this story and scientific breakdowns and scary corporate undercuts, and none of those topics are shied away from. I seriously don't even know how Spielberg read the first couple chapters of this book and went, yeah, I'll make a movie about this and allow families to come see it. It gets seriously dark even from the beginning. But what's cool about this kind of darkness and what's cool about the more rough parts of this story is that it's not there for no reason. All of it has a point, and all of it fits into the theme of man trying to control nature and dealing with technologies that he himself is not even fully capable of understanding. And speaking of mankind losing control of their technology just brings us right into pro number 3, which is the themes of this book. The themes are great. Most sci-fi books will pick 1 or 2 to kind of focus on, but with Jurassic Park, there's a whole plethora. Now, the bigger themes in this book are pretty obvious. Power, control, man versus nature, and man versus technology. But I love the nuance and attention to detail that Crichton gives each of these, and how they're woven into the narrative in a really natural and organic way that makes sense, not just forced in as some lesson that the characters spout out. Although, Ian Malcolm does kind of go off about one, which we'll talk about in our cons later. But as we talked about in our earlier pro, these themes are brought up in a way that only enhances the realism. Like, there's a great section early on in this book that talks about corporations and companies having a technological arms race to try to see who can develop new technologies faster to become the next richest company, and how unchecked and mismanaged they all are. And this was written in 1990. These themes are still applicable today, and if anything, they're only scarier now. This book is aged really well, and the themes that it discusses are still applicable to our everyday life. And for our last pro, even if you don't care about any of the stuff we've talked about before, if you don't care about the technology that makes this all possible or the bigger themes, the story itself is great. The characters are all generally pretty likable and understandable. I think they're even better than in the movie, personally. And I think the narrative is tense. This is easily a horror, survival kind of action story aside from the sci-fi elements. And it's great. You always have that feeling of tension of what's going to happen next. Oh man, everything's getting crazier and crazier and worse, and how is this all going to resolve? And that's a mark of a really good writer, considering I've seen the movie, I know how it theoretically ends, and I was still pretty tense while reading this book. So with all those pros, I'm definitely going to recommend this book to everybody. I think every fan of sci-fi and just fans of reading in general should read it. And Michael Crichton's writing style is perfect for getting through it pretty quickly. He's a lot like Stephen King, where his books look pretty big and intimidating, but you'll have read through like 30 chapters before you even know it. So I definitely recommend giving this a try. However, there is one small con that I gotta talk about with this book. Now, this con does seem a bit nitpicky, because it is. Because when I sat down to do this review, I honestly thought, is there anything that I actually dislike about Jurassic Park? And the only thing that came to my mind is that sometimes the characters can get a bit preachy about the themes, particularly Ian Malcolm. Now, this is a pretty small gripe, because this is what Ian Malcolm's character is like from the beginning of the book, and also he goes through some pretty traumatic stuff that causes him to be a bit more preachy than normal, so it's all naturally set up in a way that's realistic. It's just that after a while of hearing his speeches about how, man shouldn't play God, it definitely gets to be repetitive. Like, I got the point pretty quickly. That being said, though, again, it is a small gripe. It is a very small thing to know this in an otherwise super tightly written story. And it's still, man, aside from that, it's about as close to perfect as you can get for one of these types of books. So yeah, Jurassic Park is getting a hard recommend from this channel. Thanks again for staying till the end of the video. And now stick around for a couple more seconds for the cute bunny clip.